The clatter of plates and hushed murmurs were the soundtrack to Adrian's life. Every evening, dressed in his crisp black and white uniform, he moved through the grand ballroom of the Grandeur Hotel. He was a man in his mid-30s, his kind eyes often holding a faraway look, but his hands were steady as he balanced trays of delicate appetizers and sparkling drinks. Adrian wasn't just a waiter, he was a silent observer, a master of invisible service, his every action precise and thoughtful. Each tip, no matter how small, was carefully counted, a silent promise to his son, Leo. Leo was Adrian's world, a bright-eyed 6-year-old with a laugh like wind chimes. After dropping Leo off at his friend's house before his shift, Adrian always pictured his son's happy face, which fueled him through long hours. He worked hard, juggling the demands of impatient guests and busy kitchens, all to make sure Leo had everything he needed. Their small apartment, filled with Leo's colorful drawings and Adrian's well-loved books, was a haven. Adrian knew this life wasn't what he'd once planned, but it was a life built on love, and for Leo, he would do anything. Tonight, however, felt different. A palpable tension hung in the air, hinting at a very important, very stressful corporate dinner. The tension Adrian sensed earlier now thickened the air like fog. He entered a private dining room, usually a place of celebration, but tonight it felt like a silent battlefield. A long, polished mahogany table dominated the space, set with gleaming silver and crystal that reflected the soft glow of the chandeliers. On one side sat a group of serious-faced Japanese investors, their expressions polite but unreadable. Opposite them were the American executives, their smiles tight, their eyes darting nervously. At the head of the table, commanding attention, was Ms. Albright, the CEO of Albright Innovations. She was in her late 30s, sharp and poised, with an intensity that seemed to fill the room. Her tailored suit was impeccable, her dark hair pulled back in a severe but elegant style. She spoke with a clear, firm voice, even when addressing Adrian to simply ask for more water. He recognized the type, powerful, successful, and accustomed to getting her way. This was a high-stakes dinner, a crucial negotiation that could make or break a major deal. Adrian, in his humble uniform, felt like a ghost moving through the opulent room, serving drinks and clearing plates, yet acutely aware of every word, every shift in mood. The weight of the evening pressed down on everyone, including the silent waiter pouring sparkling water. Adrian moved silently around the table, topping up glasses. He approached Ms. Albright, who was deep in conversation with one of her executives. Without looking at him, she extended her hand, holding an empty water glass. "More water," she stated, her tone flat, as if speaking to an object rather than a person. There was no "please," no glance of acknowledgement, just an expectation of immediate service. Adrian refilled the glass, his movements practiced and smooth, and placed it back on the coaster. Her eyes remained fixed on the executive, never once meeting his. Later, as he cleared appetizer plates, Ms. Albright gestured vaguely in his direction. "Waiter," she called, her voice slightly impatient. "Could you tell the kitchen to speed up the main course? We're on a tight schedule." Again, no direct address, no hint of seeing him as anything more than a functionary. It was a common experience for Adrian. He was used to being invisible, a part of the background machinery. Yet tonight, with the palpable tension and the importance of the deal, her dismissal felt particularly stark. He simply nodded, a silent figure in the grand room, and quietly relayed the message, his presence noted only for what he could do, not for who he was. As the main course was served, the negotiations intensified. A young translator, hired for the evening, fumbled with complex industry terms. He stuttered, paused, and often summarized rather than translated directly. The Japanese investors, initially patient, began to exchange uneasy glances. Mr. Tanaka, the lead investor, a man whose quiet demeanor hid sharp intelligence, finally spoke in Japanese, his voice calm but firm. The translator struggled to convey the message accurately. He says, they need a more complete understanding, the translator stammered, his face flushing. The nuances are difficult. Ms. Albright frowned, her impatience growing. What nuances? We're talking about market share, not poetry. Mr. Tanaka responded again, his words flowing smoothly, but the translator could only offer a fragmented interpretation. He feels the spirit of the proposal is not being conveyed. He looked helplessly at Miss Albright. The room fell silent, the tension now palpable enough to cut with a knife. The Japanese delegation leaned back, their arms crossed, a clear sign of displeasure. Mr. Tanaka then spoke directly, in perfect, albeit slow, English. We cannot proceed. The meaning is lost. We require proper translation, or we must conclude our evening. His polite words carried the weight of an ultimatum. The deal, Adrian realized, was on the brink of collapse. The silence after Mr. Tanaka's ultimatum was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Miss Albright looked furious, her eyes scanning her team for a solution. The young translator stood pale and defeated. Adrian, who had been collecting empty water glasses, felt a familiar stir deep within him. It was a language, a nuance, a connection that he understood. Memories of university lecture halls, of delighted students finally grasping a complex phrase, flashed through his mind. He hesitated, his heart thumping. Stepping forward meant breaking his silent, invisible role, something he hadn't done in years. But the deal was dying, and he knew he could help. Taking a deep breath, Adrian cleared his throat, a small sound that nonetheless drew every eye in the room to him. "Excuse me," he began, his voice surprisingly clear, though a tremor ran through it. "If I may." "I understand Japanese. I could perhaps assist with the translation." A beat of stunned silence followed. Ms. Albright stared, her expression a mix of disbelief and annoyance, as if a chair had suddenly offered advice. The other executives looked equally bewildered. Mr. Tanaka, however, regarded Adrian with a flicker of curiosity, a slight tilt of his head. Adrian felt a blush creep up his neck, but he stood his ground, offering the only thing he had that could save the evening. With a hesitant nod from Miss Albright, who clearly had no other option, Adrian stepped closer to the table. Mr. Tanaka spoke, his voice gentle but his words intricate, describing the philosophy behind their company's approach to partnership. As he finished, Adrian translated not just the words, but the underlying sentiment, the respect for tradition, and the long-term vision. He spoke with a quiet confidence that filled the room, his Japanese fluid and precise, his English eloquent and clear. The Japanese investors, who had been stiff and reserved, now softened. Mr. Tanaka's face, once unreadable, broke into a small, appreciative smile. He responded, his voice more relaxed, and Adrian seamlessly translated, capturing the subtleties that had eluded the previous translator. He didn't just translate words, he translated intentions, cultural nuances, and unspoken expectations. Ms. Albright watched, her initial annoyance giving way to a flicker of surprise, then outright astonishment. Her executives, too, leaned forward, their skepticism melting into genuine interest. The atmosphere in the room transformed. The rigid tension began to ease, replaced by a current of understanding. Adrian, the invisible waiter, had suddenly become the vital bridge, connecting two worlds with a quiet, powerful grace. The negotiation, once stalled, was now flowing, carried by the unexpected rhythm of his voice. As Adrian's voice filled the room with precise, meaningful translations, his mind drifted back. It wasn't always this way. Years ago, Adrian was Dr. Adrian Vance, a respected university professor of linguistics, fluent in 5 languages, specializing in East Asian cultures. His office was filled with ancient texts, his days spent in passionate lectures and groundbreaking research. He loved his work, a world of intellect and discovery he shared with his brilliant wife, Clara. Then came the diagnosis. Clara's illness was swift and cruel. Adrian walked away from his tenure-track position without a second thought, his books packed away, his research left unfinished. He became her primary caregiver, learning a new language, the language of medicine, of comfort, of unwavering devotion. When Clara passed, leaving him with their infant son, Leo, Adrian's academic life was a distant memory. The university offered him a part-time position, but it wasn't enough. Leo needed him fully, so he traded lecture halls for hotel ballrooms, complex theories for crisp white shirts, and the pursuit of knowledge for the pursuit of stability for his son. It was a choice he never regretted, even if it meant burying a part of himself. Until tonight. Adrian continued to translate, his presence now an undeniable part of the discussion. However, not everyone was comfortable with this sudden shift. Mr. Davies, a senior executive with a perpetually skeptical expression, cleared his throat loudly. "Ms. Albright," he began, his voice barely concealing his irritation. "While this individual's linguistic skills are certainly surprising, I must question the appropriateness of having a member of the hotel staff involved in our confidential negotiations. This is a high-level discussion, not a casual chat." Another executive, Ms. Chen, nodded in agreement. "Indeed, it sets an odd precedent. We have sensitive information being exchanged." Her gaze flickered to Adrian, a hint of disdain in her eyes, as if his uniform made him incapable of discretion. Adrian felt a familiar prick of dismissal, a reminder of his place in this world. He kept his expression neutral, ready to step back if asked. He understood their concern, or rather, their discomfort with someone outside their elite circle suddenly becoming indispensable. Ms. Albright, however, remained silent, her eyes fixed on Adrian, a thoughtful, almost calculating look on her face. The Japanese investors, sensing the unease, exchanged glances, their earlier warmth beginning to cool. The delicate bridge Adrian had built threatened to crumble under the weight of corporate protocol and ingrained prejudice. Just as Mr. Davies was about to press his point, Ms. Albright raised a hand, silencing him. Her gaze, which had been thoughtful, now hardened with a CEO's resolve. She turned to her executives, her voice crisp. "Mr. Davies, Miss Chen, your concerns are noted. However, this individual, as you call him, has just done more to advance these negotiations in the last 20 minutes than our entire team managed in the past 2 hours. She then looked directly at Adrian, a rare, direct look that held a new respect. His ability to bridge not just language, but cultural understanding is precisely what we need right now. Mr. Tanaka and his team are clearly comfortable with his interpretations. To remove him now would be a greater risk than any perceived precedent. Her words were a shield, protecting Adrian from the executive's judgment. Ms. Albright had seen past the uniform, past her own initial dismissal. She recognized genuine talent and, more importantly, a crucial insight into the Japanese mindset that her company lacked. Adrian wasn't just translating words, he was translating worlds. In that moment, Ms. Albright realized Adrian's quiet strength and unique perspective were invaluable, a missing piece that could unlock success for Albright Innovations. The air cleared, and the Japanese investors, reassured by Ms. Albright's defense, settled back, ready to continue. As the negotiations continued, Ms. Albright found her attention drawn to Adrian in a way it hadn't been before. She noticed the subtle intelligence in his eyes, the calm way he handled complex ideas, and the gentle respect he showed to everyone, even her more demanding executives. He wasn't just a voice, he was a presence, quiet yet powerful. She saw how effortlessly he navigated the conversation, not just translating, but sometimes offering a concise cultural explanation that smoothed over potential misunderstandings before they even arose. Her initial dismissiveness melted away, replaced by a growing admiration. She saw past the uniform to the man beneath, a man of deep knowledge, unwavering integrity, and a quiet strength that resonated deeply. Adrian wasn't chasing power or recognition. He was simply doing what was needed, with remarkable skill and humility. A spark ignited within Ms. Albright, a feeling she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't about his job. It was about who he was. She found herself catching his eye more often, a subtle warmth replacing her earlier coolness. This unexpected connection, born in the heat of a high-stakes deal, hinted at something more, something gentle and new. With Ms. Albright's firm backing, Adrian continued to facilitate the conversation, now with a greater sense of purpose. He wasn't just translating questions about market projections. He was explaining why the Japanese investors might prioritize long-term relationships over immediate profits. When a point of contention arose regarding a clause about future market expansion, Adrian gently interjected, explaining the Japanese concept of nemawashi, building consensus slowly and carefully, and how a more direct approach could be perceived as disrespectful. His insights were invaluable. Ms. Albright, initially focused solely on the numbers, began to understand the deeper cultural framework. Adrian's quiet guidance helped her adjust her strategy, leading to a proposal that honored both American ambition and Japanese tradition. He suggested a slightly revised wording that acknowledged shared vision before detailing financial specifics, a small change that made a profound difference. Mr. Tanaka and his team visibly relaxed, their smiles becoming genuine. They nodded in appreciation at Adrian's thoughtful interpretations, sensing that their intentions were finally being understood. The negotiation, once a rocky path, now felt like a shared journey. Adrian's contributions, far exceeding simple linguistic conversion, secured critical common ground, proving to be the linchpins that would ultimately bind the deal together. He was no longer a waiter, he was an essential diplomat. Hours later, the dinner concluded with a handshake. The deal was secured, a monumental success for Albright Innovations. The Japanese investors rose, bowing deeply to Ms. Albright, and then, surprisingly, to Adrian. Mr. Tanaka spoke in English. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. Your wisdom was truly invaluable. We look forward to a fruitful partnership." Ms. Albright's executives, including Mr. Davies and Ms. Chen, now regarded Adrian with undisguised admiration. Their earlier skepticism had vanished, replaced by a quiet awe. They offered genuine smiles and murmured their thanks as they passed him. Adrian, still in his waiter's uniform, felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. As the room emptied, Miss Albright lingered. She approached Adrian, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Adrian," she said, using his name for the first time, her voice gentle. "Thank you. You saved this deal. More than that, you opened our eyes." There was a depth in her gaze that spoke of genuine respect and perhaps something more tender. It was a recognition that went beyond his unexpected skill, acknowledging the man himself. Adrian, the invisible waiter, was finally seen, truly seen, and the feeling was profound. After the successful conclusion of the dinner, Adrian changed out of his uniform, the stiff fabric feeling different tonight, less like a costume and more like a discarded layer. He walked home through the quiet streets, the night air cool against his face. The city lights blurred around him, but his mind was clear, replaying the events of the evening. The surprise, the tension, the sudden shift in perception, and Miss Albright's eyes. Reaching his apartment, Adrian unlocked the door to a comforting glow. Leo, having just finished his evening snack, was sprawled on the living room rug, surrounded by a rainbow of crayons and scattered sheets of paper. He was humming a little tune to himself, completely absorbed in his world of colors and shapes. Adrian smiled, the day's extraordinary events fading into the background, replaced by the simple, profound joy of seeing his son. Leo looked up, his face lighting up. "Daddy, you're home!" he chirped, holding up a half-finished drawing. It was a familiar scene, but tonight, Adrian felt a deeper sense of peace. The world outside might be complex and demanding, but here, with Leo, was his true anchor. Adrian knelt beside Leo, admiring the colorful chaos of his son's artistic creations. "What are you drawing tonight, buddy?" he asked, his voice soft. Leo beamed, holding up a fresh sheet of paper with a triumphant flourish. On it, amidst a cheerful blue sky and a green patch of grass, were 3 distinct, unfamiliar shapes drawn in bold black crayon. "It's a secret code!" Leo declared, his eyes sparkling. "My friend Kenji taught me. He said it means something important in Japanese." Adrian's breath caught. He looked closely at the characters. They were simple, elegant strokes, unmistakably the kanji for ai, which means house or home. It was a word that held so much meaning for Adrian, representing the sanctuary he had built with Clara, and now with Leo. A silent tear pricked the corner of his eye. "It means home, doesn't it?" Adrian whispered, a lump in his throat. Leo nodded vigorously. "Yeah, Kenji says his grandma writes it on special cards." Adrian hugged his son tightly, burying his face in Leo's soft hair. The drawing was more than just a child's scribble. It was a grace note, a gentle reminder of why he had made his choices, and a quiet promise of new beginnings. The path ahead, perhaps with new connections and new opportunities, would always lead back to this home, this boy, his greatest triumph.